White heavy checkmark disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction created solely for emotional and entertainment purposes. It explores themes such as loneliness, emotional betrayal, and infidelity. The characters, incidents, and situations are entirely imaginary and not based on real people or events. Reader discretion is advised, especially for those sensitive to themes of relationship conflict and personal boundaries. I first saw him on a Monday morning. I was sipping my lukewarm coffee while absent-mindedly staring through the living room window when the sound of a truck pulling up drew my attention. A tall man in dusty jeans and a worn gray t-shirt stepped out, pulled a tool belt from the back, and glanced around as if looking for something or someone. His eyes swept across the front yard and, for a moment, paused on the window where I stood. I instinctively stepped back, heart beating slightly faster than usual. My husband, Greg, had hired him to fix the broken fence and rework some of the landscaping. Greg rarely did anything himself around the house anymore, especially since his promotion. He was always too busy, always glued to his phone or meetings, even at home. I was used to being alone now, alone in a marriage that once used to feel full. The man outside started working efficiently, with a focused look on his face and sweat already glistening on his forehead in the morning heat. I didn't know why I was still standing there watching him. Maybe because it was something new. Maybe because I hadn't felt curious about anything in a long time. By noon, I found myself looking again. He had taken his shirt off now, wiping his brow, hammer in hand. His back muscles moved with each strike, strong, controlled, confident. I hated that I noticed. I hated more that I didn't look away. Later that day, as I walked to the mailbox, I passed him. "Afternoon," he said, his voice low, calm. I nodded politely. "Working hard," I replied awkwardly. He smiled. "Trying to. Your husband mentioned this place needed some attention." That stung more than I expected. For a moment, we stood in silence, just long enough for it to feel strange. I quickly said goodbye and turned toward the house. But even as I closed the door behind me, I could feel his gaze lingering. Or maybe I just imagined it. Either way, something inside me stirred, an unease, a curiosity, maybe even a hunger. That night, Greg didn't come home until almost midnight. He barely said hello. I asked if he wanted to eat. He said he already had dinner. I asked about his day. He shrugged. And just like that, another evening passed in silence, as if I were invisible in my own home. But the man outside, he had seen me. Even if just for a second, he noticed me. And that was more than my husband had done in weeks. The next day, I told myself not to look. To act normal. To not create stories in my head about a stranger with strong arms and an easy smile. But by 10 a.m., I was already glancing through the curtains. He was back, digging around the fence post, his movements sure and steady. I tried to distract myself by cleaning the kitchen. I vacuumed the hallway. I even opened a cookbook, pretending I was planning something special. But every 5 minutes, I caught myself drifting back to that window. Around noon, I stepped out with a glass of cold lemonade. Not for him, at least, that's what I told myself. I pretended to be watering the plants. He looked up from behind a wooden post and smiled. "You're braving the sun today," he said, wiping his brow. I laughed nervously, trying to pretend I'm a gardener. He leaned on the shovel and looked at me. "Well, you pretend better than most I've seen." That made me laugh, genuinely this time. There was something easy about him. No pressure. No expectations. He wasn't trying to impress me, and yet somehow I found myself wanting to stand there a little longer. "I'm Liam, by the way," he added. "Didn't properly introduce myself yesterday." "Claire," I replied. "Nice to meet you." He nodded and looked back at the fence. "Your husband told me it's been falling apart for a while." Of course he did. I forced a smile. "Yeah, like most things around here." He glanced at me, but didn't say anything. That silence, it felt understanding, not awkward. And I didn't know why, but that made me want to tell him more. Over the next few days, this dance continued. I would step out for air, and he'd greet me with a small joke or an update on his progress. Sometimes we talked for 5 minutes, sometimes for 20. I learned he used to live in a small town, that he loved working with his hands, and that he wasn't married. No kids. No girlfriend. I didn't ask directly, but he made it clear enough. I told him about my love for painting, about how I once dreamed of opening a small gallery. He asked why I didn't. I shrugged. Life got busy. Then quiet. Then hollow. He looked at me then, really looked, and said softly, "That sounds lonely." I didn't reply. I didn't have to. That night, when Greg came home late again, I didn't bother asking where he had been. He dropped his briefcase, mumbled something about being exhausted, and went straight to bed. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the 2 plates on the table, only one of them touched. I thought of Liam. His voice. His eyes. The way he made me feel like I mattered. And somewhere deep inside, a small, dangerous part of me started to wish I'd run into him again tomorrow. It happened on a Wednesday. Greg came home earlier than usual, which should have been a pleasant surprise, but instead he brought with him a thundercloud of irritation. Work stress, he claimed, even though the way he barked at me felt personal. I tried to ask what was wrong, tried to ease his frustration, but he was in no mood for kindness. Every word I spoke seemed to annoy him more. After dinner, a cold and silent affair, I tried again to break through. I told him I missed talking to him, that I felt like we'd become strangers. That was the wrong move. He exploded, telling me I was too sensitive, too needy, always picking fights for no reason. I stood there, stunned, the sting of his accusation slicing right through me. When I tried to answer, he walked away, slammed the door to his office, and didn't come out. My hands were still shaking as I stepped outside to breathe. The air felt cooler against my flushed skin. I wiped tears from my cheeks, ashamed to be crying again, especially over a man who didn't even seem to care. I almost jumped when I heard someone call softly, "Claire." Liam was there, leaning against the half-finished fence, watching me with those steady eyes. I tried to hide my face, but he saw it, saw everything. "Are you all right?" he asked, cautious but gentle. I tried to laugh it off. "Oh, you know, married life." He didn't laugh. Instead, he set down his gloves, walked closer, and looked me straight in the eye. "That doesn't look like normal married life." I felt the tears coming again, hot and humiliating. Before I could stop them, they spilled down my cheeks. And to my horror, I started to sob, chest heaving, shoulders shaking, all the pain I'd tried to hold inside bursting out like a flood. Liam didn't run away. He didn't shrink back in awkwardness. Instead, he reached out, hesitated for a moment, and then placed his rough, calloused hand gently over mine. His warmth steadied me. "I'm sorry," I whispered. I shouldn't dump this on you." "Don't apologize," he said firmly, voice low and calm. "No one deserves to feel alone like that." I looked up at him, searching for any hint of judgment, but there was none. Only compassion. Only understanding. When he squeezed my hand in comfort, something inside me shifted. It was a tiny spark, a moment of closeness that felt a little too right, too easy. My heart thudded in a way I hadn't felt for years. I pulled my hand away before anything could happen, but the electricity of that simple touch lingered, echoing in every part of me. That night, lying next to my silent husband, I thought about Liam's warm hand, his steady eyes, and how he'd made me feel human again, even if only for a moment. And that terrified me. The sky turned gray by early afternoon. Thunder grumbled in the distance, low and steady like a warning. I stood at the kitchen window watching Liam continue his work despite the shifting weather. He moved with purpose, hammering the last of the wooden panels into place, trying to beat the rain. Greg had left early that morning, some urgent meeting in another city. He hadn't kissed me goodbye. Not even a text since he left. I wasn't surprised. Just tired. By 4 p.m., the storm hit. Hard. Sheets of rain slammed against the windows, and lightning streaked the sky with violent cracks. I peeked outside and saw Liam scrambling to cover his tools with a tarp. His shirt was soaked, clinging to his chest, and water dripped from his hair. He looked miserable. Without thinking, I threw on a hoodie, grabbed an umbrella, and ran out into the rain. "Liam, come inside. You'll get sick out here," I shouted over the wind. He looked at me hesitant. "I'm fine, Claire." "Really, don't argue," I said firmly, reaching for his arm. "Just come in." He didn't resist. Inside, I handed him a towel and motioned toward the small guest bathroom. "Dry off. I'll get you something warm." 10 minutes later, he emerged in one of Greg's old sweatshirts. It hung a bit loose on him, but he looked comfortable, familiar, like he belonged. I handed him a mug of coffee. "You okay?" He nodded, offering a small smile. "Better now." We sat in the living room as the storm howled outside. The power flickered once, then cut off completely. The house fell into silence, save for the drumbeat of rain. I lit a few candles and brought them over. Their soft glow made everything feel softer, quieter, more intimate. "I didn't mean to intrude," Liam said, his voice low. "You didn't," I replied, settling beside him on the couch. Minutes passed. We sipped our coffee in silence. Our knees brushed accidentally. Neither of us moved. "I used to love storms," I said, surprising myself. "They made me feel safe. Like the world was cleansing itself." "I get that," he said. "Like a fresh start." He looked at me. The kind of look that sees through you. I felt exposed, vulnerable, but not afraid. His hand reached for mine again, slow, tentative, asking permission. And I let him. The silence between us cracked like the lightning outside. Our fingers interlaced, our breaths slow and shaky. His eyes dropped to my lips. And then, like the storm we'd both been avoiding, it happened. We kissed. Not rushed. Not wild. Just deep, slow, aching. Like we'd both been waiting far too long to feel something. When we pulled apart, I didn't say a word. Neither did he. We just sat there, hand in hand, while the storm raged on. The storm outside may have passed, but the one inside me was just beginning. After that kiss, everything felt different. Sharper. Louder. Like the air between us had permanently changed its texture. Liam didn't try to push things further that night. We sat quietly, our hands still touching, our knees still brushing, but our hearts beating a little too fast. Eventually, he stood up. "I should go," he whispered. I nodded, barely able to meet his eyes. "Yeah, okay." But I didn't move. And neither did he. The seconds stretched until he finally asked, "Do you want me to stay?" I should have said no. I should have stood up, walked him to the door, and closed it behind him like nothing ever happened. But I didn't. I just said yes. We didn't rush. We didn't say much. We simply moved together, silently, as if pulled by something we didn't fully understand. I led him to the guest room. He followed. We stood by the bed, inches apart, breathing the same air. His hand touched my cheek with a tenderness I hadn't felt in years. No urgency, no expectation, just care. When our lips met again, everything inside me surrendered. His hands traced the outline of my loneliness, and I didn't stop him. I welcomed it. Needed it. That night, we crossed the line. And when I woke the next morning, tangled in sheets that were no longer just mine, the weight of what I'd done hit me like cold water. I sat up slowly, the room spinning with guilt. Liam stirred beside me, his arm reaching for me in sleep, but I slipped out of bed quietly. I dressed in silence, avoiding the mirror. I couldn't face the woman staring back. In the kitchen, I gripped the counter, heart pounding. What had I done? I'd never meant to cheat. I wasn't that kind of woman. But the truth was, I hadn't felt married in a long time. Greg hadn't touched me in months. He barely looked at me anymore. Our conversations were reduced to schedules and silence. But did that justify this? Did my pain give me permission to betray him? Liam appeared in the doorway, shirtless, his eyes searching mine. "Claire," I shook my head, tears building. "We can't do this again. I made a mistake." He didn't argue. He just looked at me with quiet sadness. "You didn't make a mistake. You just chose something real for once." That broke me. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe this was real. That what we shared mattered. But all I could feel was the sinking guilt of betrayal. I told him he needed to leave before Greg returned. He nodded, grabbed his things, and paused at the door. "I'll finish the fence tomorrow," he said softly. "But after that, I'll go." And then he was gone. And I was left standing in the middle of a home that suddenly didn't feel like mine anymore. The next morning felt colder than it should have. August sun filtered through the windows, but I couldn't feel its warmth. I moved through the kitchen like a ghost, brewing coffee I didn't want, staring blankly at toast I wouldn't eat. Liam didn't come that day. Neither did Greg. I kept checking the window, hoping and dreading at the same time. My guilt from the night we spent together clung to me like a second skin. I replayed everything in my head, the kiss, the touch, the moment I let go of everything I thought I believed in. By noon, I heard a knock. I held my breath. It was him. Liam. He stood there at the door, eyes tired, expression unreadable. He held his tool belt like a shield. "I came to finish the fence," he said quietly. I stepped aside. "Okay." He worked in silence. No casual conversation, no soft smiles, just hammering, measuring, sawing. The wall between us had been rebuilt faster than the one he was repairing outside. But something in me couldn't let it end like this. When he took a break for water, I walked outside and sat beside him. We didn't speak for a moment. The silence this time was heavy, not comforting, but aching. "I need to know something," I finally said, my voice small. "Was I just a mistake to you?" He looked at me slowly. "No," he said. "You were never a mistake." I nodded, swallowing hard. "Then why does it feel like I ruined everything?" He sighed and leaned back against the fence post. "Because the truth is complicated, Claire. And we both cross lines we didn't plan to." He hesitated, then added, "There's something I didn't tell you. Something I should have said earlier." My heart skipped. "What is it?" He stared ahead, as if bracing himself. "I knew Greg. A long time ago. Not well, but we worked on the same site years ago. He was different back then. Still arrogant, but younger. He always talked about some girl he rushed into marrying. Said she was too soft for the real world." My blood ran cold. "He said that?" Liam nodded. "Didn't use your name, but I figured it out when I saw your wedding photo on the mantle that day. It took me by surprise. And maybe that's why I wanted to know you. To see who you really were." I felt the world tilt slightly under me. All these years, I had blamed myself for not being enough. And here was a man who had seen Greg clearly from the start. "I never meant to get close," he added. "But I did. Too close. And now I don't know how to walk away without hurting both of us." I looked at him, my throat tightening. Maybe we're already hurt. The truth between us hung there like fog, thick, unshakable. And even though the fence was nearly complete, everything else around us was still painfully broken. I should have known secrets don't stay buried. Not when guilt is eating you alive from the inside. 3 days passed. Liam finished the fence and disappeared without another word. I didn't call him. I didn't even have the right to. The space he left behind was thick with silence, and I buried myself in the small, dull routines of pretending everything was normal. Then Greg came home. He was unusually quiet that evening. His suitcase dropped at the door, his eyes barely met mine. He didn't mention work, didn't ask how things were. But there was something strange in the way he looked at me, like he was watching me for the first time in a long time, and not in a good way. Dinner was awkward. The clink of forks against plates was the only sound between us. I couldn't eat. He didn't seem to try. Then, just as I stood to collect the dishes, he said it. Flatly. Coldly. "Who is he?" I froze. My hands trembled, and the plate nearly slipped from my grip. "I saw the messages," Greg continued. "On your phone. You must have forgotten to delete one. You thanked him for making you feel seen." Every word hit like a hammer. I turned slowly. "Greg, he stood now too." "How long?" he demanded. "Greg, please, how long, Claire?" he shouted this time. I stared at him, feeling like the walls were closing in. It wasn't planned. "I didn't mean to, but you did it anyway," he cut in. His face was red with fury, veins rising in his neck. "I work, I provide, I break my back for this house, and you," he shook his head, lips curling in disgust, "you sleep with the help." Tears welled in my eyes. "Don't reduce it to that. You left me long before I ever touched him." "Bullshit," he spat. "I was working for us. You don't get to play the victim." "No," I whispered. "You were working for you." That snapped something in him. He didn't hit me. Greg had never been physically abusive, but he grabbed the edge of the table and shoved it back, hard, making the plates crash to the floor. "I want you out," he said coldly. "Tonight." My breath caught. Greg, he didn't look at me again. He walked away, went upstairs, and slammed the door. The sound echoed through my ribs. I spent the night on the couch, crying into a blanket that smelled like a life I no longer belonged to. The next morning, his suitcase was gone again. Just like that. No goodbye. No discussion. He'd found out. And nothing would ever be the same again. Weeks passed. Then months. The house felt quieter without Greg in it, but strangely not emptier. In truth, it had been empty long before he left. It just didn't echo as much until now. The divorce process began almost immediately. There weren't loud fights or long legal battles. Just cold signatures, scanned documents, and silence. He didn't ask me why I did it. He didn't want to know. And maybe I didn't want to explain it anymore. The truth wouldn't change anything. As for Liam, he was gone too. After he finished the fence, I never saw him again. No messages. No knock on the door. No goodbye. At first, I checked my phone constantly, hoped for some kind of closure. But eventually, I stopped waiting. Some endings don't come with explanations. They just leave a space. I threw myself into my art. I hadn't painted in years, but now it became my therapy. My escape. My rediscovery. I started going to the local studio again, met new people, even showed a few pieces at a small gallery opening. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave it somewhere to go. Then, on an unusually warm November afternoon, I saw him. I had just come out of a cafe, balancing a sketch pad and a cup of tea, when I looked up and there he was, standing across the street. Liam. His hair was shorter, his beard a little thicker. He looked older, or maybe just more grounded. And he wasn't alone. A woman stood beside him, holding his arm. They weren't touching intimately, but they were close. Comfortable. He hadn't seen me yet. I could have walked away, ducked behind the corner, pretended it never happened. But I didn't. I stood there. And then he looked up. Our eyes locked. A flicker of recognition. A pause in time. His expression didn't change much, just softened slightly, the way it does when an old memory brushes past your shoulder. He gave me a small nod. I returned it. No words. No wave. Just two people sharing a silent understanding across the road that had once brought them together, and then torn them apart. And that was enough. I turned, walked away, and felt a strange sense of peace settle in my chest. I didn't regret what happened. I regretted how lost I had been. But Liam, he reminded me of something I hadn't felt in years. Alive. And that mattered. I wasn't the same woman who had stood at the window, watching a stranger fix her fence and longing to be noticed. I was someone who had faced her own darkness, made mistakes, paid the price, and survived. Sometimes, the people who break us also teach us how to rebuild. And, sometimes, the most honest kind of love is the one that doesn't last. 92L